And he said Rick just lost his f***ing mind because he had to go to the hospital and they're going to amputate his. Well, his was the most dearest thing to him.
Back in his prime, people called Rick Rude ravishing, but behind that chiseled physique was a darker truth because something else was tearing him apart from the inside. Steroids, and according to many rumors, that addiction would eventually play a major role in his death. But the story becomes even stranger because when he was found, he was discovered lying naked on the floor, and in this video, I'll tell you what really happened. The ravishing rise and controversial career of Rick Rude is tied deeply to the world of professional wrestling, a world built on larger-than-life characters, intense athleticism, and storytelling that constantly blurs the line between reality and fiction, and among the legendary performers who ruled wrestling's golden era. One man stood out not just for his sculpted body and magnetic charisma but for a career filled with controversy, personal struggles, and a mysterious death that continues to spark debate more than 2 decades later. This is the story of ravishing Rick Rude, a man whose journey from a small Minnesota town to wrestling's biggest stages ended far too early under circumstances wrapped in rumors, medical issues, and heartbreaking loss. Born Richard Irwin Rude on December 7, 1958, in the quiet town of St. Peter, Minnesota, he grew up in an environment that unexpectedly produced a wave of future wrestling stars, and Rick Rude attended Robbinsdale High School alongside an incredible lineup of future legends including Tom Zenk, Brady Boone, Nikita Koloff, Kurt Hennig, who became known as Mr. Perfect, John Nord, who later became the Berserker, and Barry Darsow, who would go on to become Demolition Smash, creating one of the most remarkable concentrations of wrestling talent ever to come from a single small community, and it was no coincidence that this environment would shape Rick Rude's path forever. It spoke to something in the culture, a toughness and competitive spirit that seemed to shape the entire area during that time, and after finishing his education at Robbinsdale High School, Rick Rude didn't jump straight into professional wrestling because he first took a more traditional path by attending Anoka Ramsey Junior College, where he earned a degree in physical education, a fitting foundation for a man whose body would later become one of his most iconic trademarks. Before entering the wrestling world, Rude worked several jobs that highlighted his natural strength and grit, including time as a bouncer in some of Minnesota's rougher bars and even competing in arm wrestling contests, where his power and competitive nature were clearly visible. His move into professional wrestling came in 1982 when he began training under the legendary Eddie Sharkey, a respected coach responsible for shaping many of the Midwest's top talents, and Rude made his professional debut in 1983 as Ricky Rude, starting out as a babyface, wrestling's term for a heroic character, and working as a jobber in Vancouver's NWA All-Star Wrestling promotion, where his early role was to lose matches and help build up more established wrestlers. During these early years, Rude moved through several territorial promotions including Georgia Championship Wrestling and the Memphis-based Continental Wrestling Association, slowly refining his skills and developing the personality that would eventually make him a fan favorite and a villain audiences loved to hate. By 1984, while working in Memphis, Rick Rude began reshaping his character into the arrogant, cocky heel of villain role that would define his entire career, and with the guidance of manager Jimmy Hart, he started forming the early version of the ravishing Rick Rude persona by highlighting his impressive physique and provoking intense negative reactions from crowds with calculated insults and bold behavior. His famous routine began to take form as he would walk into the ring with complete confidence, tell the crew to cut the music, and then insult the local fans with sharp, personalized jabs, often calling them fat, out-of-shape sweat hogs before removing his ornate robe to reveal his sculpted body and performing his signature hip swivel, a move that quickly became one of wrestling's most recognizable and controversial trademarks. Rude's breakout success came in championship wrestling from Florida, where he was managed by Percy Pringle, who would later become widely known as Paul Bearer in the WWF. He captured regional championships and quickly proved himself as a legitimate star, winning the NWA Florida Southern Heavyweight Championship twice. First by defeating Pez Whatley in January 1985 and later Mike Graham in July of the same year, before eventually dropping the title to the legendary Wahoo McDaniel. He also formed a strong tag team with Jesse Barr, winning the NWA Florida United States Tag Team Championship in April 1985 and taking part in memorable feuds with veterans like Billy Jack Haynes and Wahoo McDaniel, battles that helped solidify his reputation as a tough, dependable performer who could work with anyone. His momentum continued as he moved to World Class Championship Wrestling, later renamed the World Class Wrestling Association, and in November 1985, Rude defeated Chris Adams to win the NWA American Heavyweight Championship, and when the promotion left the National Wrestling Alliance to create its own World Championship, Rick Rude became the first WCWA World Heavyweight Champion in 1986. During this time, he briefly teamed with a rising wrestler known as the Dingo Warrior, who would soon become the Ultimate Warrior and whose future clashes with Rude would create some of the most unforgettable moments in wrestling history. The WCWA era also featured Rude's heated feuds with the legendary Von Erich family, Texas wrestling royalty beloved by fans, and their battles with Rude and other heels produced must-see television across the region. In 1986, Rude returned to Jim Crockett Promotions and teamed up with Manny Fernandez to form the Awesome Twosome under the guidance of the cunning manager Paul Jones, and their partnership paid off when they defeated the Rock and Roll Express, one of the most iconic teams in wrestling history, to capture the prestigious NWA World Tag Team Championship in December 1986. They held the titles until Rude's departure from the promotion in April 1987, showing just how versatile he was and how easily he could shine in both singles and tag team competition, and this championship run strengthened his growing reputation while setting the stage for the biggest move of his career. Rick Rude's arrival in the World Wrestling Federation in 1987 marked his rise to true national fame, and after initially being managed by Jimmy Hart, he eventually aligned with the legendary Bobby "The Brain" Heenan as part of the famous Heenan family stable, where Rude perfected every aspect of his character. His entrance became a performance of its own as he demanded silence from what he called the fat, ugly sweathogs in the crowd before dramatically removing his robe to show off his 6 feet 3 inches, 252-pound, sculpted physique, wearing custom airbrush tights that often featured his own face or even the faces of his opponents, creating instant controversy. After winning his matches, he would pick a woman from the audience, usually arranged by his manager, for a post-match kiss, adding even more heat and showmanship to his already intense villain persona. But it was his rivalries that truly defined his WWF legacy, and few feuds in wrestling history blended real personal tension with scripted storytelling quite like his battle with Jake the Snake Roberts. The feud began in 1988 when Bobby Heenan chose a woman from the crowd for Rude's traditional post-match kiss, not realizing that she was Jake Roberts' real-life wife, Cheryl, and the situation escalated when Rude began wearing airbrush tights with Cheryl Roberts' face on them, a move that genuinely angered Jake Roberts and created backstage tension far beyond the scripted storyline. The feud reached its peak through multiple matches at major WWF events, including WrestleMania 4 and Survivor Series 1988, where Roberts humiliated Rude by stripping him in the ring and revealing that underneath his airbrush tights, Rude was wearing only a G-string. A moment that ended up requiring television censorship and cementing the rivalry as one of the most unforgettable in WWF history. T became one of the most talked about moments in WWF history and perfectly showed Rick Rude's willingness to push boundaries and blur the lines between kayfabe illusion of reality in wrestling and genuine personal conflict, creating real discomfort for everyone involved but driving audience engagement to levels rarely seen at the time. Even more impactful was Rude's rivalry with the Ultimate Warrior, a feud that began during a superpose down at the 1989 Royal Rumble where both muscular stars flexed for the crowd in a contest judged by Jesse the Body Ventura, and when Ventura declared Rude the winner, the Ultimate Warrior snapped and attacked him with a metal bar, sparking one of the hottest rivalries in WWF history. At WrestleMania 5, with perfectly timed interference from Bobby Heenan, who distracted Warrior at a critical moment, Rude captured the WWF Intercontinental Championship, marking Warrior's first major defeat and cementing Rude as a true main event level performer in the world's biggest wrestling company. As Rick Rude prepared to leave the WWF and pursue new challenges in World Championship Wrestling, no one could have predicted that his greatest achievements were still ahead of him, but so were the devastating injuries, personal battles, controversial choices, and mysterious health issues that would ultimately lead to one of wrestling's most tragic and debated deaths, turning his once unstoppable rise from Minnesota to international fame into a journey filled with dark and unexpected twists. Championship glory, career-ending injury, and the chaos of the Monday Night Wars were waiting for him as Rick Rude entered WCW in 1991, beginning a new chapter where he would earn the biggest accolades of his in-ring career while also facing the physical decline that would one day end it all. His WCW debut at Halloween Havoc came wrapped in mystery as he arrived wearing a mask and played the role of the shadowy WCW Phantom, setting the stage for another unforgettable era in his storied career. The reveal of his identity sent shockwaves through the wrestling world, and within just 3 weeks of arriving, Rude had already captured championship gold by cheating to defeat the legendary Sting for the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship. His alliance with Paul E. Dangerously, who would later become known worldwide as Paul Heyman, and the creation of the Dangerous Alliance stable marked one of the most memorable eras in WCW history, as the group featured major names like Arn Anderson, Bobby Eaton, Larry Zbyszko, stunning Steve Austin, who would one day become Stone Cold Steve Austin, and the fierce manager Medusa, forming a powerhouse collection of elite technical wrestlers and brilliant strategists. As the group's unofficial leader and the reigning United States champion, Rude entered high-profile feuds with some of WCW's top stars, including the dynamic Ricky, the Dragon Steamboat, the powerhouse Nikita Koloff, and of course his ongoing war with the face-painted icon, Sting. Rude's run as United States champion lasted an incredible 14 months, the second longest reign in the title's long history, proving not only his ability to captivate audiences but also WCW management's trust in him as a top-tier performer capable of giving the championship prestige and legitimacy. However, late in 1992, disaster struck when Rude suffered a legitimate neck injury during a match, a severe blow that forced him to vacate the United States Championship and step away from the ring to recover, marking the first major warning sign of the physical punishment his body had endured through years of demanding performances. When Rude returned in 1993, he set his focus on the biggest prize in the sport, the World Championship. T-Fall Brawl 1993, Rick Rude achieved what many consider the peak of his career when he defeated the legendary Nature Boy Ric Flair, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. And when WCW's partnership with the National Wrestling Alliance ended shortly afterward, the title was rebranded as the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship, though its prestige remained the same. Rude would hold this championship 3 times, trading victories with Japanese legend Hiroshi Hayes and his longtime rival Sting in matches across the United States and Japan, where wrestling was respected as a true athletic competition. But during a match with Sting in Japan, Rick Rude's in-ring career came to a sudden and heartbreaking end. On May 1, 1994, at Wrestling Dontaku, later aired in the United States as Spring Stampede, Rude attempted a suicide dive, a risky move where a wrestler throws themselves over the top rope toward an opponent outside the ring. But in a split second that changed everything, Rude's back slammed against the edge of the raised entrance ramp with brutal force, causing severe spinal damage. Despite the intense pain, Rude pushed through, finished the match, and even defeated Sting to win the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship one final time. But that match would be the last of his professional wrestling career. At only 35 years old, with years of potential still ahead of him, Rude was forced into early retirement as the injury was so severe that he collected on a Lloyd's of London insurance policy designed to protect wrestlers from career-ending injuries. And while WCW explained his departure in a storyline by saying he used the championship belt as a weapon and therefore forfeited the title, the reality was much more serious and permanent. The chronic pain from this injury, combined with years of wear and tear from constant bumps, high-impact moves, and pushing his body beyond its limits, became a burden that Rick Rude would carry for the rest of his life. The injury also marked what many wrestling observers believe was the beginning of Rude's growing dependence on pain medications, muscle relaxants, and other pharmaceutical substances to manage the constant pain he lived with, a dependence that would later play a tragic role in the circumstances surrounding his death. Unable to wrestle but still carrying the charisma, presence, and name recognition that made him valuable, Rick Rude shifted into non-wrestling roles. In 1997, he made a brief appearance in Extreme Championship Wrestling, the rebellious promotion known for its hardcore style and adult-oriented content, where he mostly worked as a commentator and a masked antagonist in storylines involving ECW's franchise star, Shane Douglas, eventually joining Douglas's villainous stable, the Triple Threat, and adding his signature heel heat to ECW's already edgy programming. One standout moment from his ECW run came during a cage match at the Heatwave pay-per-view, where Rude betrayed his own teammates and helped spark an invasion led by Jerry, the King Lawler from the WWF, locking his allies inside the cage and reinforcing his image as wrestling's ultimate opportunist. That same year, 1997, Rick Rude made a stunning return to the WWF, the company he had left on bad terms 7 years earlier, and he joined the groundbreaking faction D-Generation X as their insurance policy, a non-wrestling enforcer who stood alongside Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chyna. His presence gave DX added credibility and a sense of real danger, fitting perfectly with the WWF's new Attitude Era direction focused on edgier characters and adult-themed storylines. However, Rude's return to the WWF would be short-lived, ending in dramatic fashion after one of the most controversial incidents in wrestling history. The Montreal Screwjob at Survivor Series 1997 remains one of wrestling's most infamous controversies, when WWF owner Vince McMahon secretly changed the finish of Bret, the Hitman Hart's championship match against Shawn Michaels without Hart's consent, forcing him to lose the title in his home country of Canada, and the betrayal shocked the entire industry. Rick Rude, a close friend of Hart's and working on a per-appearance deal rather than a guaranteed contract, was so disgusted by McMahon's actions that he immediately quit the WWF, refusing to interfere in the match despite being part of D-Generation X, and this decision led to one of the most remarkable moments of the Monday Night Wars, as on November 17, 1997. Rude appeared on both WWF Monday Night Raw taped days earlier in Fayetteville, North Carolina, in full DX attire with his trademark mustache alongside Shawn Michaels and Triple H, and live on WCW Monday Nitro, now with just a beard, wearing an NWO shirt, delivering a scathing promo against McMahon, criticizing Michaels, and declaring his loyalty to WCW, and when including his appearance on ECW Hardcore TV that same week. Rude achieved the unprecedented feat of appearing on all 3 major wrestling programs in just a few days, cementing his place in wrestling history, moment that perfectly captured the chaos, the corporate battles, and the blurred lines between reality and fiction that defined professional wrestling in that era, while behind the scenes, concerns were growing about Rick Rude's use of substances to manage pain and recover from grueling training and matches, as the wrestling world of the 1980s and 1990s was plagued by steroid use, painkiller abuse, and other performance-enhancing and recovery drugs, with wrestlers facing no off-season, no guaranteed health coverage, and immense pressure to maintain peak physiques and work through injuries. Rude was no exception, openly admitting to anabolic steroid use during his prime when his muscular body was a major selling point, and later, in his attempts at a comeback, evidence suggests he relied on prescription pain medications, muscle relaxants, and other drugs to cope with chronic injury pain while pushing his body to its limits. Yet little did anyone know that time was running out for ravishing Rick Rude, and within weeks of his final WCW appearance, his life would end under circumstances still shrouded in controversy, involving prescription medications, rumors of erectile dysfunction treatments gone wrong, and a tragic conclusion that devastated his family, shocked the wrestling world, and left fans and observers debating what truly happened for decades. The morning of April 20th, 1999 began like any other in the upscale Atlanta suburb of Alpharetta, Georgia, but for Michelle Rude, the wife of legendary wrestler Ravishing Rick Rude, it would bring unimaginable tragedy and the start of a mystery that continues to spark speculation and debate more than 20 years later, as when Michelle entered their home she found her husband, Richard Irwin Rude, unconscious and unresponsive, and although emergency services were called immediately, it was already too late. Rick Rude, just 40 years old, still young by normal standards and seemingly on the verge of a wrestling comeback, was pronounced dead at the scene. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the wrestling community, and the Fulton County Medical Examiner's autopsy would later reveal the official cause of death as heart failure resulting from an overdose of mixed medications, while investigators at the scene discovered empty bottles of prescription drugs including endorse, a combination of oxycodone and acetaminophen used for pain relief, Valium, diazepam for anxiety and muscle relaxation, Ambien for insomnia, and amoxil, an antibiotic, and toxicology reports showed multiple substances in Rude's system, most notably gamma-hydroxybutyrate, GHB, a drug used medically for narcolepsy but more commonly associated with bodybuilding for its supposed benefits in recovery, fat burning, and sleep enhancement, alongside other sedatives like Valium, painting a grim picture of the challenges he faced in managing chronic pain and the intense physical toll of his career.
There's a lot of mystery related to his death, and somebody randomly sent me the police report, an autopsy report related to his death, because many wrestlers, including the Honky Tonk Man, Ken Patera, the Berserker, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and Jake the Snake, have alluded that it may have been an intentional overdose due to some issue with his penis that stemmed from some type of penile injection therapy gone wrong.
The official ruling classified Rick Rude's death as accidental, the result of combining multiple substances that together proved fatal. But almost immediately after the news broke, rumors began circulating within the wrestling community suggesting there was more to the story than a simple overdose, with whispers shared in locker rooms, at conventions, and later on internet forums and social media, painting a darker and more troubling picture of Rude's final days and the circumstances that may have led to his tragic passing. The most persistent and controversial of these rumors involves alleged complications from erectile dysfunction treatments, as multiple wrestlers who knew Rude personally have recounted over the years that he suffered from erectile dysfunction, possibly linked to long-term anabolic steroid use, which can cause testicular atrophy and hormonal imbalances, and according to these accounts, Rude had reportedly begun using penile injection therapy, a legitimate medical treatment where medication is injected directly into the penis to induce an erection. But the rumors suggest that something went catastrophically wrong with this treatment.
I heard about it from Jim Neidhart, because Jim Neidhart and Rick Rude were real close friends. And I think at that time, Neidhart was living down there in Florida. I think they lived real close together. And he said Rick just lost his fucking mind because he had to go to the hospital and they're going to amputate his penis. Well, his penis was the most dearest thing to him. And so, to my knowledge, that's a true story.
Ken Patera, a former WWE wrestler and Olympic weightlifter, shared that he had heard from Jim, the Anvil Neidhart, who was reportedly very close to Rick Rude and lived near him in the South, that Rude had suffered a severe complication requiring medical intervention, and the fear of potentially losing his genitalia had plunged him into a deep depression from which he never recovered. With the story suggesting that for Rude, whose entire wrestling persona revolved around his physical appeal, sexuality, and the ravishing image that emphasized his allure to women, the possibility of losing his manhood was an unbearable blow.
As far as could he have injected his penis with this, if you look at the medical examiner report, it says the genitalia are those of a circumcised adult male. The fibrotic tissue is palpable in the left shaft of the penis. There is diffuse scarring at the base of the penis. The testes are descendant within the scrotum.
The autopsy report, as reviewed by Hannibal, shows physical evidence of scarring on Rick Rude's genitalia and notes that his testes were atrophic, meaning they had shrunk or withered, a condition consistent with long-term anabolic steroid use. And these findings have led some observers to believe there may be truth to the rumors about penile injection treatments. Although the scars could also be explained by other medical procedures or conditions unrelated to erectile dysfunction therapy, yet the combination of these physical signs in the official report has kept the speculation alive for years, with wrestling fans and commentators continuing to debate what they might reveal about Rude's final days.
It was something weird. It wasn't Viagra. It was something new that came up because they were going through the era of the steroids. And I never did steroids. I was 245, 50 pounds in my prime. And because I already had a name.
Larry Zbyszko, a wrestling veteran who worked with Rick Rude in WCW, offered further insight into Rude's substance use in an interview years after his death, noting that Rude had a reputation for excess, whether it was steroids, pain medications, or supplements, following the mindset that if some was good, more must be better, and this pattern, combined with the intense physical demands of training for a comeback and the chronic pain from his career-ending back injury, created a perfect storm of risk factors that may have contributed to his fatal overdose. However, not everyone accepts the more sensational rumors suggesting intentional suicide linked to erectile dysfunction complications, as Rude's widow, Michelle, strongly disputed any claim that her husband's death was anything other than an accidental overdose, telling wrestling personality Bruce Pritchard that Rick had been managing significant pain from his injuries, had recently experienced minor accidents that worsened his discomfort, and that the combination of medications he was taking for legitimate medical reasons tragically proved fatal, while calling the suicide rumors extremely silly and insisting that spreading such stories was disrespectful to Rick's memory and their family. And that brings us to the end of this video, and for more videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.